Welcome to another session of Small Group Leader Training. Now, for this session, I want to respond to a few questions that we've heard from some of you leaders about the curriculum or the questions that you use every week during your group time. As you probably know, we put our small group questions inside the program at every campus every Sunday. Well, for the purposes of this training, I'm going to be walking you through one particular one, this one right here. This is from a series we did in May of 2012 called You'll Get Through This. It was based on the life of Joseph. Now, we put these questions in the program for a couple of reasons. First, to allow every person who attends a group to have the questions ahead of time so that they can show up prepared. And our thinking is that if small group members can spend time thinking about these questions and studying the verses on their own, it'll make for a better discussion once you all kind of sit down in a group together. But we also think this is a great way to promote small groups to those who aren't even connected to one. It takes a little of the mystery out of what people can expect in a group, and it can give them some confidence that if someone were to decide to show up to group for the first time on any given week, they're kind of on the same page with everybody else who's in there. But let's talk about how you as a group leader can best use these questions to have a great group discussion. The first section that you'll see on the page is always going to be the 5G questions. Now, we print these right at the top, as well as putting them on the DVD lesson. Again, our hope is that group members will spend some time thinking about them before they actually come to group. But for you, the leader, here's some tips that might help you as you lead the 5G discussion. The teacher on the DVD will always explain the G for the week, and then he's going to prompt you to discuss it. Each week, we try to vary up the questions a little bit just to keep things fresh, but the goal each time is going to be the same. These 5 areas are critical to becoming more like Jesus. So first of all, take them seriously each week. The goal here is to have repeat discussions in your group and to track the progress of your group members. Now, a great thing to do is each time you discuss a specific G, for example, on this particular week, we're dealing with group or relationships. Take notes on the responses of your group members and have them set goals or some kind of action steps for that G. And then the next time that G is discussed, pull out your notes. And you can use them to follow up with each other to see what's happened since the last time you discussed that specific area of spiritual life. Now, the goal for this section is not perfection, it's movement. I mean, you want to know that the folks in your group are moving forward and taking steps toward becoming more fully devoted to Jesus. All right? Let's talk about the sermon-based discussion part. Okay? You'll notice that every lesson has a goal stated right at the beginning. Now, this particular week, the sermon was about how Joseph handled discouragement. Okay? So the goal for this lesson is, it says, to investigate how Moses dealt with discouragement. And you'll find that the discussion questions always take Sunday's topic and they delve a little bit deeper. Now, this goal statement helps you to know where you're leading your group in this discussion. And then there's the questions. Now, I think it's important for you to read, go over, and then write down some answers to all of them before you try and lead your group in discussing them. But one thing to keep in mind is that not all of the questions are the same. See, some of them are designed for discussion, but some aren't. Some are just simply informational, and it's probably a good idea to sort of make a note of that. In fact, let's walk through this lesson, and I'll show you what I mean. Notice the first question is always the same, no matter what we're talking about. It says, what did you find challenging, helpful, or troubling about Sunday's message? Now, this is an opportunity to simply hear your group's thoughts on what they learned during the sermon. It's a good way to get things started on a topic. And you can also kind of get a heads up on where the discussion might be going based on how everybody sort of perceived the topic. This can also help if some group members weren't at church. You get a chance to sort of recap what was talked about. Then on most lessons, there's going to be 1 or 2 opening questions that they're designed for a lot of free response. Like this one, for example. What kind of eater are you? Like a bird, too little? Like a dog, too eager? Or like a cat, too finicky? Sometimes these will tie into the topic, but sometimes they won't. Again, it's just a fun way to break the ice, get the ball rolling on discussion. Now, after those questions, you'll usually notice a section where we ask you to read a section of Scripture and then answer some questions about that passage. And a lot of times those questions are primarily informational, like this one where you read from Exodus chapter 15, then you answer things like, what was the Israelites' complaint? Well, what did Moses do? You'll also see in this section things like look up some verses on a Bible website. Sometimes we'll ask you to read 2 verses and compare the 2, or we'll ask you to rewrite the verses in your own words. The point is this. This is the part that is more yes, no, factual kinds of questions, just to sort of focus your thoughts on the meaning of that passage of Scripture. Then you'll notice towards the end of the lesson, you'll see 1 or 2 questions that lean towards some opinion-based answers, or maybe even some action steps, decisions to make. Like here, it asks you to form an opinion on Moses' response in the stories that you read. And then it asks you to apply it to your own life. Talk about how and when you get discouraged and how you handle that. Now, this is where the lesson tries to bring it all back around to us. This is where the group gets more personal and action-oriented things happen in the discussion. You talk about action. Now, that's pretty much how every set of questions is going to flow almost every week. Now, let's talk about some strategies on using them. My advice on this one is to spend some time before group and note which questions are going to be good for discussion, and then you need to spend most of your time on those. Usually when I'm leading a group, I'll highlight or I'll mark 1 or 2 opening questions that I definitely want to use to open, and then I'm going to mark 1 final question that I know is going to lead my group to talk about the so what of the topic. Questions where we're confessing our own struggles, or where we make commitments to change, or we decide on a real application of the topic that we can actually use in real life. And then when I start leading, I'll always make sure that I get those questions asked and answered no matter what else happens. Now, that doesn't mean that I ignore the middle part where the Bible study is done, but I just know that there's not going to be much discussion to that part. A lot of times I'll pick 1 or 2 of the passages and I'll just have somebody read them out loud. Then I'll just allow for just a brief discussion on the highlights of the facts and what we all pulled out of it. Honestly, I don't usually ask my group all of those questions in the middle, mainly because a question like, what did Moses say, only allows one person to answer. I like to stick mainly with questions that allow everybody to get involved. The big thing to remember going into preparing for a group discussion is this. Where are we headed in this discussion? What questions do we need to cover to get us there? And then let the curriculum just sort of work for you, not the other way around. I mean, if you just treat it like a written formula and simply read all the questions back word for word to your group, it's probably not going to go very well. But if you put a little thought and a little preparation into it and you use the questions in the best possible way, you'll be able to start a pretty lively discussion that could very well change somebody's life. And isn't that what we're here for in the first place? And as always, if you have questions or problems that you run into, you can call your team leader or you can contact one of us here at the church office and we'll be glad to help you. Thanks again for leading small groups at CCC, and we really do appreciate the work you do toward helping people in our church grow to full devotion to Christ.